Today, we're talking about movies that I have a strong love-hate relationship with. I'm talking about movies that you should never, ever watch on a first date. Movies that you should probably not watch with your parents. These type of movies, I'm not really sure who they exist for, to be honest. If you're a sadistic person, you'd probably like these movies, but that doesn't mean they're bad. In fact, the three movies I'm talking about today are pretty great, despite the fact that they're hard to watch. Very hard to watch. These movies intrigue me, but they also disgust me. Not because they're gross per se. That being said, movies like this absolutely can be, and they are gross in different ways. They're awful to watch because of how far they're willing to go to psychologically torment the viewer. These movies go beyond the common horror slasher that everybody freaks out about. You know what I'm talking about, movies like Terrifier or The Human Centipede. Yes, those movies are pretty disgusting. These movies that I'm going to be talking about go beyond any common horror or slasher tropes and instead target innocence and kindness at their core. These movies base themselves in reality and completely strip the characters of their dignity and their humanity. They purposefully lure you into thinking that you're watching a typical horror movie, only to blindside you with the most horrific thing you'll ever see. Like, at least when you turn on Terrifier or The Human Centipede, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. When you watch these movies I'm going to be talking about today, you go in thinking, oh, how bad could it be? To these movies are cruel to the characters and the audience. They'll most certainly ruin the rest of your day if you watch them. They put you in this like weird funk after the credits roll, and you'll see why. And after you watch these movies, you typically avoid them like the plague. Unless, of course, you're watching it with your worst enemy or you have a trauma kink. The first movie we're talking about today is called Speak No Evil. It was directed and written by Christian Taftrup and released in 2022. It follows a couple and their daughter. The famous idiom that this movie's title comes from, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, or whatever it is, means the complete avoidance of harmful or malicious activities. This is something that the protagonists in this movie practice, and by doing so, were completely ill-prepared when they were met with a force that didn't abide by this same code. Throughout this movie, harrowing music plays. So the movie kind of tonally prepares the viewer for some terrible stuff that's about to happen. But as the movie goes on, most of the events seem mundane. And as a viewer, you start to question why the music is making you feel so uneasy, because nothing you're watching is really matching this same tone. The music offers a great sense of foreboding. So you're kind of sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for something to happen, but nothing does. So you just keep watching, hoping that the music will make sense eventually. The protagonists in this movie are Bjorn, Louise, and their daughter Agnes. I'm gonna be pronouncing all the names in this video in the American way. One of the earliest scenes of the movie shows Bjorn sitting by a pool. He's approached by a stranger who asks him if they're using a pool chair that has some of Agnes's belongings on it. No normal person would do this. If you see a chair with someone's stuff on it, the last thing you're gonna do is ask if you can use that chair. You would obviously just assume that they're using it, but this person doesn't. This is the earliest foreshadowing of the savagery that's to come. The man that took the chair was testing Bjorn. He was asking to take something from him that he knew was theirs. He wanted to see how Bjorn would react. And yes, of course, this is trivial. Who cares? It's just a pool chair, right? But it was also proving to this stranger that Bjorn is a good target due to his meek response and his readiness to so quickly give up what is his to please a stranger. I'm not saying he owns the pool chair, but you know what I mean. Not long after this, our characters watch a live opera, and the song moves Bjorn to tears. These tears came from beauty, from art, from life. Quite the opposite of the tears that Bjorn will be shedding near the end of this movie. Bjorn is impatient and easily irritated by petty problems, like his daughter losing her bunny doll early in the movie, so he has to go and search for it. This goes to show that people who are living their best lives will often take them for granted. He's on vacation with his family. He should be enjoying himself, What he doesn't know is that these are some of the last memories he'll ever have with his family before he meets some of the worst people on Earth. Enter Patrick and Karen, a couple that seems exceedingly polite. They're courteous, they're complimentary, they're funny and hospitable. Bjorn and Louise understandably don't question their motives at all when they invite them for lunch. By the looks of things, they're both new parents, so they can relate to one another. Patrick and Karen have a child of their own named Abel. Bjorn and Louise are told that Abel has a disorder that prevents him from communicating, so he can't speak. Very suspicious. At this lunch, Patrick and Karen are both extremely kind. This continues into the evening when they share dinner together with a larger group. The first part of their plan is a success. They were meant to leave a great impression on Bjorn and Louise. They part ways and they allow them to marinate on this encounter. Talk about how nice they were. Oh my god, we have so much in common. We would be great friends. You know what I mean? We interrupt this video for 10 seconds to tell you to shop at alienclothing.com, my personal clothing brand. We've got an insane blowout sale going on right now. So if you want something, now is the time to get it. Use discount code BLOWOUT30 to get 30% off your order. Yes, 30% off. I'm not trolling. This sale will only be active for 48 hours, so get something while you can. Here are some of my personal favorites. Go to alienclothing.com, or better yet, download our app on the App Store. Just search Alien, AYYLIEN, and download it. Okay, back to the review. I know that wasn't 10 seconds, by the way. Some time passes and the family receives a postcard from Patrick, inviting them to a trip. The lure has been cast. Will they take the bait? Of course they will. As a viewer, you don't know what Patrick and Karen's game is. You have every reason to believe that they're perfectly fine people. I mean, obviously it's a horror movie, so maybe you have something in the back of your head say, something's not right. Maybe it's the music, but you don't know what their intentions are. All you know at this point is that they're friendly and seemingly normal people. The only indicator given to the audience that something isn't right is the music. And that's by design, because most predators out there don't walk around telling everybody that they're predators. They blend in, you know? Eventually, the family meets up with Patrick and Karen. Initially, everything is fine. Everyone is cordial with each other. The only outlier is Patrick's son, Abel. He's quiet and distant. He almost seems depressed. I wonder why. And then the cracks begin to show. Patrick starts to toy with their kindness and respectfulness. During an earlier scene, Louise had told him that she's a vegetarian.
So, you're a vegetarian?
Yeah.
That's so good. We could all learn from you.
Patrick decided that they'd all dine on wild boar. Karen tells them that he's been cooking all day. Patrick insists that Louise try some, knowing full well that she's a vegetarian. And she does so to please him, not because she actually wants it. This is an early test by Patrick to see how malleable their personalities are, if they'd bend to pressure or not. On the surface, it might seem like a test only for Louise, but it's not. It's to test Bjorn as well. Patrick wanted to see if he'd act against the pressure to break his wife's lifestyle or not. Bjorn does the opposite. He urges Louise to try it, so as not to come across disrespectful or rude. This was a very subtle deconstructing of their character by Patrick, something Bjorn and Louise would never pick up on. An early warning sign for Bjorn was when he was asked to bring the trash out. While outside, he approaches their shed and peers into the window. It's too dark to see inside. Abel finds him out there and stands before him.
You got games on your phone?
Unable to speak, he opens his mouth to reveal that his tongue has been cut out. Abel was trying to communicate to Bjorn what was actually happening here. But of course, you know, he's a child, he's scared shitless, and he literally can't speak. So unless he wants to take the risk and try and write down what's happening here, this is the only thing he could think of.
Abel, kom binnen. Veel te koud.
Later, Patrick explains to Bjorn and Louise that Abel has a disease that led to him being born without a tongue. Of course, this is a lie.
But is he in pain?
Oh, no pain.
But who in their right mind would think that the friendly person that you're talking to cut out their own child's tongue? You know, it just doesn't make sense. That night, Bjorn and Louise hold Agnes in their arms in bed and assure her that she's safe because they're there, which couldn't be further from the truth.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
During their stay, Agnes had to hang out with Abel, and she can tell that something's not right. She tries to tell her parents, but, you know, they think that she's just a dumb kid. She couldn't possibly know better than they do. The next day, Patrick is uncharacteristically cruel with his son, as far as Bjorn and Louise are concerned anyway. Later, Louise expresses to Bjorn that she would like to leave, because she doesn't find these people pleasant to be around anymore. She's getting the feeling that something is off about them. They go out to dinner that night. Patrick and Karen hire a babysitter, which is a random guy that shows up that they never mentioned to Bjorn or Louise. And he's meant to watch their children out of nowhere. And Bjorn and Louise feel like they have no other option but to agree to this.
Hey, guys! Let's go! Come on, let's move!
Surprise, surprise, this guy isn't really a babysitter. He's actually there to test Agnes's temperament. But we don't actually see this happen. During their dinner, Patrick's mask starts to slip a little bit. He's rude, arrogant, and presumptuous. Afterwards, he drives them home drunk and blasts music extremely loud, despite Luis's wishes.
Patrick, the music, can you turn it down? I love this song!
Patrick enters the bathroom while Luis is taking a shower, and he brushes his teeth. This is pretty weird behavior, right? Of course, Luis can't say anything because it's their house, but it's still pretty invasive. The protagonists are learning pretty quick that Patrick and Karen don't give a shit about boundaries, and it's only gonna get worse. Later, Luis and Bjorn have sex. Patrick watches them do this through a window for a moment. Bjorn sees him watching them, and he's still able to bang his wife. It's so weird. How could you possibly continue to have sex with someone if someone that you hardly know is staring at you while you're doing it? I would go, Mwah. Afterwards, Louise finds that her daughter isn't in her bed. Instead, she's in Patrick and Karen's bed. And Patrick is butt-ass naked. The blanket is slightly off of his ass so you can see that he's naked. It's so weird and inappropriate. And I'm pretty sure Patrick is doing all of this to see how far he can push their boundaries before they do something about it. It's like a little game for him. Louise is understandably horrified, so she takes Agnes out of their bed, and they decide to leave that night without telling them, which is a pretty good call. I mean, I would do the same thing. As a viewer, while you're watching this, you're like, hell yeah, good call. Get out of there while you still can. We find out that Agnes accidentally left her stuffed bunny rabbit behind, and she's very upset about this, and Bjorn, being a hero, has to go back and get it. God damn it. This part is so infuriating. I'm 100% serious when I say this. I have never been more upset with the actions of a character in my life. And it turns out the rabbit wasn't even at their house. It fell underneath the car seat, like god damn.
Say.
Finn, hvor var den hen?
You stupid bitch.
Louise and Bjorn are confronted by Patrick and Karen. Strangely, they're able to dispel their grievances. And they were so close to escaping. I feel like the director must have been trolling the audience with this part. Of course, it's also a callback to the beginning when Bjorn didn't want to get the rabbit because he was annoyed, but he got it anyway. And when he told Patrick about this, Patrick was like, wow, that's a really cool thing for you to do. You're a hero. I mean it. Which is ridiculous. Like, he's a hero for finding this little girl's bunny rabbit? Come on, dude. Obviously, we know why Patrick was doing this. He said that to him in the beginning of the movie to make him like him, you know? Like, damn, this guy likes me. Holy shit. Maybe I am a hero. Patrick and Bjorn go on a car ride, and during this car ride, they connect a little bit. Well, really what's happening is Patrick is toying with him. He's trying to tap into the animalistic side of Bjorn, because this is a side of Bjorn that has been kept dormant his entire life. And let's be honest, that's the same for most people out there. There's a pretty cool scene of Bjorn screaming at Patrick's behest. They're on top of this hill. The shot is far away, but then the shot changes to a close-up shot. I don't know, I just thought it was cool filmmaking. Earlier in the movie, Patrick had told them that he's a doctor, and I guess he forgot that he told them this, because there's a moment when Louise cuts herself with a knife, and Bjorn's like, oh, thank God we have a doctor here.
Medic!
And Patrick's like, I'm not a doctor. What are you talking about?
Didn't you say you were a doctor?
Did I? Oh, I lied. You lied?
He then tells them that he's unemployed and he doesn't believe in work. Kind of a massive red flag right there. They all sit down for a meal, and during this meal, Karen speaks to Agnes as if she's their child, and she continues to do it for a while, until Louise has had enough. And she's like, stop doing that please, you're being weird as hell.
En doe je een beetje voorzichtig met dat geluid. Beetje zachter. Oké, lieverd?
You'll see why Karen's doing this soon enough. Later, Patrick emotionally abuses Abel in front of everybody.
Patrick, what the fuck? Why can't you just let him dance?
Oh, that wasn't dancing.
That night, Bjorn lies awake in bed. He hears Abel crying among other sounds. Eventually, he gets up and finds that a TV is on and blaring. He turns the TV off. A sink is also on. He turns that off as well. He notices that a door is open outside. It leads to the shed that he was trying to peer into earlier. He goes outside and then enters the shed. Inside this shed, he finds a ton of family photographs. Patrick and Karen are in each of these photos with a different couple. And in each photo, they have a different child between them. Bjorn then finds Abel's dead body floating in some water. In a panic, Bjorn rushes his family out of the house. Earlier in the movie, it shows us that their car is low on gas. And you're probably thinking when you see this, oh, Patrick did this, right? He must have taken their gas out somehow. But then they show us Bjorn and Louise getting gas at a gas station. So they just put the gas back in. So they're good, right? No.
Huh?
Bjorn gets spooked by a car behind him, so he makes the worst decision imaginable. Bjorn drives off the road and gets the car stuck. It's infuriating. What are you doing? I would be driving so careful. Why would he risk getting his car stuck? If this car was them, how would driving off the road help at all? And of course, there's no service in the area, which kind of makes sense, you know. If Patrick and Karen wanted to do something to these people, why would they invite them to an area that had service? Bjorn tries to find help at a house nearby, and he tells Louise and Agnes to stay behind in the car. Why would he do that? Why would he tell his wife and child to stay behind in a car by themselves, helplessly? Bjorn finds nobody at the house, and returns to find that his wife and daughter are missing. Patrick then pulls up in a car with everybody in it, including Louise and Agnes. The movie from here on out is insanely triggering, so be fully warned as I continue. The level of dread you feel during this final act is insane. Patrick and Karen have done this many times before with many other couples, so they're both calm and collected. Patrick flashes his car lights to signal their babysitter to come over. He's revealed to be a partner in crime. The babysitter grabs Louise and restrains her, as Karen takes hold of Agnes and cuts out her tongue. Ah! She does this in the car with her parents watching. Why aren't these two fighting back? Well, they tried to at first, but Patrick and Karen easily shut them down. With the help of the babysitter, there was nothing they could do. Patrick overpowers Bjorn, both mentally and physically, so he has to sit there helplessly as they do whatever they want with their daughter. The fight in them has been distinguished. Their daughter is gone, and with her, their will to fight. Patrick punches Bjorn over and over to keep him from interfering. Agnes is then taken out of the car by the babysitter. Patrick then drives away, with Karen, Bjorn, and Louise still in the car. Bjorn asks, "Why are you doing this?" Patrick responds, "Because you let me."
Why are you doing this? Because you let me.
God damn it, those lines hit like a freight train. Louise and Bjorn are ordered to undress and walk down into a ravine. A pile of rocks is beside them. They're then stoned to death by Patrick and Karen. Are there other couples buried under these piles of rocks that are near them? Probably. We next see Patrick and Karen driving with Agnes sitting in the back. During the ending, the same opera music is playing in the background as was performed at the concert near the beginning of the movie. Patrick and Karen use the children of their victims to attract more victims, so they can kill them and repeat this cycle. It's so brutal. I'm assuming they just use the money from those that they kill, because how else would they, pay for stuff? It's not like they sell the kids off because they killed Abel, but who knows, maybe they sell most of the kids off, but they decide to kill Abel for whatever reason. This movie solidifies my personal belief that you should always be apprehensive of people, even when they seem kind and courteous on the outside. I think there's an important message behind this movie. It illustrates very well how paralyzing blind benevolence can be. Of course, we should all strive to be as kind and hospitable as possible to one another, but only to a point. So that was a doozy. Let's continue. The next movie we're talking about is The Nightingale. It was released in 2018. It says 2018 on IMDb, but then 2019 on Amazon. So one of them is wrong. It was written and directed by Jennifer Kent, which is the same director behind 2014's The Babadook, which I quite liked. And I like this movie a lot too. It's great, but most people shouldn't watch it. This movie is extremely mature. So if you can't handle serious stuff, then I definitely don't recommend you watch it. This movie's gut punch scenes are in the first act. And yes, that's plural. Scenes. And hoo boy, they are difficult to watch to say the least. The movie is set in 1825, a time when misogyny and racism was rampant and socially acceptable. It follows a young Irish woman named Claire. This movie is a revenge tale. And of course, most, if not all, revenge tales start with a horrific act against the protagonist or their loved ones. And this is the most brutal revenge tale I've ever seen. Claire works as a maid in a small village. A troop of soldiers stop there for a few days. While there, it's her job to provide food for them. She's also a nightingale, meaning she sings for their entertainment. The lieutenant of these soldiers named Hawkins likes Claire. He orders her into a private room and tells her to close the door. He asks her to sing a song just for him. She does so. Claire is also married to a blacksmith named Aiden, and they have a child together. We learn that at one point, Hawkins had her freed from prison. He says that he allowed her to marry Aiden. Hawkins claims that he got them a horse. Claire retorts that it was Aiden who worked for 3 years to earn enough to buy it. It's pretty obvious that Hawkins had her released from prison only because he, thought she was hot. He wanted her for himself, but she didn't want him. So he tried to buy her affection by purchasing a hut for her. Wow, very cool, dude. I'm sure this little tiny shack cost you like, what, 1 cent? He probably just had some slaves build it for him. Let's be real. Hawkins is a man with a god complex, and he feels like Claire is ungrateful, and he's owed something in return for all the things that he's done for her. And we all know what that something is. So what does Hawkins do? He takes it by force. It's extremely uncomfortable to watch. Would you believe me that it gets worse? 'Cause good lord, it gets worse. He lets her leave. Claire, obviously traumatized, tries to push this trauma far, far down so she won't have to explain what happened to her husband later. Claire is due to be given her ticket of freedom from Hawkins, which will allow her and her family to leave and live independently from the army. But of course, Hawkins wants her legally chained to him for obvious reasons. She had asked him for the ticket and he refused. Later that night, she tells Aiden about this. Aiden becomes upset and decides to demand it from the lieutenant the following morning. When this happens, he's denied. That night, Aiden drinks too much, and he makes the foolhardy decision to confront the lieutenant a second time. This time, in a fit of rage, Aiden punches Hawkins, and a fight breaks out. The captain of the army notices this and calls Hawkins into his office. The captain notifies Hawkins that his unseemly conduct has ruined his chances to be granted captaincy in the North. Fuck! A position that he was gunning for. That night, Aiden and Claire were planning to leave, but they weren't quick enough. God damn it. I hate this part with a fiery passion. Okay, maybe they had to gather their things before they could leave. That makes a lot of sense. And Claire had to feed her kid before they left. They just weren't ready. It's just like a perfect storm of shit that's happening to them right now. Hawkins and some men show up at their hut. Hawkins orders an apology from Aiden. Aiden apologizes and then Hawkins punches him. Aiden's pride is injured, so he makes another dumb decision and jumps for a rifle. Hawkins and his men quickly stop him. What follows is so heinous that I'm gonna save you all from the scene. If you're desperate to know what happens, I guess think of the eclipse from Berserk, but grounded in reality. After all is said and done, Aiden and the child are dead. Claire survives, but is left severely mentally scarred. Her only driving force to stay alive at this point is to get revenge.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
I'm gonna be honest here, there are very few characters in movies that I hate more than Hawkins. He is such a contemptible guy. Pretty much everything he does throughout this movie is incredibly awful, and I hate him so much. This movie definitely accomplished what it was trying to, make us hate Hawkins. Maybe they went a little bit overboard. The cruelty in this movie feels so honest and authentic to the time.
You want me to take the word of a woman convict over that of an officer?
It makes it that much more painful to behold. The immersion honestly hurts, but the filmmaking is incredible, and the acting in this movie is impeccable all around. It's just when it's delivered in a movie like this, it just does not make for a fun time. Claire ends up hiring a guide, an Aborigine named Billy. She hires him under false pretenses to find her husband up north. Of course, she really just wants to find Hawkins and his men so she can kill them. The injustices and suffering as a black man during this time period makes Billy a perfect companion for Claire. They've both suffered greatly, but in different ways. I appreciate how they don't make Claire perfect either. She's racist just like most white people of the time.
That's my black.
What do you mean yours?
He's my guide, you fool!
But this slowly changes as the movie progresses. And Billy initially treats Claire as he would any white person, with apathy. Both of their prejudice comes to light. Billy is confident enough to speak to Claire honestly, because she's a woman on her own, and white women didn't have the same power as white men. Before he gets to know her, he believes that she, being a white person, has had very little hardships in her life compared to him. Throughout the movie, he learns of her life as an Irish woman, and how her life was very difficult even before the incident, and he slowly begins to sympathize with her, and vice versa. We learn that Billy's family was also murdered by white men. At the time, it wasn't safe for a black man to travel on his own, but it was also unsafe for a white woman, especially a pretty one, to be traveling by herself. This being the case, they were forced to look out for one another to survive. which strengthens their bond. As if we needed any more of a reason to hate Hawkins and his men, they take a black woman from her baby and tie her up to a cart so they can have their way with her as they travel. They leave her baby in the woods to fend for itself. This movie works overtime to make us absolutely loathe these men as much as humanly possible. Eventually, Hawkins and his men get ambushed by some aboriginals that were searching for this woman that they kidnapped. After they find her, Hawkins executes her in front of them and then runs away. Iago, one of the 3 perpetrators from the incident that Claire is tracking, is found. He was separated from the group during the chaos, injured during the ambush, and Claire is following him close behind. When she catches him, it's a slow and brutal kill. Later, Billy finds her standing over this man's body, so she's forced to come clean about her lie. Eventually, they have a run-in with Hawkins. Claire and Billy are standing up on a cliff, and Hawkins and his men are down below. Petrified at the sight of him, Claire fails to shoot him. Perhaps she hesitates because deep down she knows that death is too easy. It's not nearly enough of a punishment to satiate her revenge. Or perhaps she hesitates because she knows that once he's dead, her mission is over, and that afterwards she would have nothing to live for. Or maybe it's just because the sight of him gives her Vietnam flashbacks because, he caused her quite a bit of trauma. Or it could be a combination of these things. Claire runs away, leaving Billy with her horse. Hawkins and his men find Billy, but Claire is nowhere to be found. So Claire is now on her own. While by herself, she has several PTSD-fueled nightmares, where she sees her dead family and the men that caused her so much pain, and they're beautifully filmed. The dreams she has are mixtures of good times she once had and the trauma that she can't escape. It's like no matter what she tries to think about, the trauma always seeps in. It's always there. In one dream, there's Irish music playing in the background, and she's dancing. This is probably an echo of a fun memory, but then she's dancing with the men from the incident, and it sends her into a spiral of panic. It's like her body is trying to defend itself from this trauma, but it's ever present, despite what she tries to think about. There's a young prisoner boy named Eddie traveling with Hawkins. Hawkins gave him a pistol and appointed him the new sergeant, since his old Sergeant Roos proved so incompetent. Hawkins did this as a way to insult Roos. Later, when Eddie hesitates to shoot Billy upon Hawkins' instruction, Billy narrowly escapes, and so Hawkins leaves Eddie behind after scolding him. Eddie cries and begs not to be left behind, saying over and over,
I'll shoot the next one, I will! I'll shoot the next one, I will!
His cries remind Hawkins of the atrocities he committed, and he can't bear it, so he shoots Eddie dead. Afterwards saying,
Can't stand the fucking noise of it.
With the help of a Blackbird song, Claire finds the road to town. On the road, she runs into Billy again. During their travels, they run into all sorts. There's one horrific moment when they run into a group of men transporting some Aboriginal slaves. And then these men kill their slaves in front of Claire and Billy just for talking. Claire has to pretend that Billy is her slave in order to get past them safely. And then they run into an elderly couple. Unlike most people in this movie, this elderly couple are kind and gentle. They even invite them into their home to feed them. And they let Billy eat at the table, which I guess was a big deal back then. At the very least, it was a sign of human decency, at least for the time. This tells the viewer that not everybody was awful back then. Just most people. Eventually, Claire and Billy end up in the same town as Hawkins and Roos. Claire follows Hawkins into a building where he's having a meeting with some men for his captaincy. Claire walks right up to the table where he's sitting. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Killing Hawkins with a bullet is too simple. She needed to murder his spirit first. And where better than in front of his superiors? She needed to confront him and express to him, in front of everyone, that he no longer has any power over her. In fact, at this moment, she has the power. She belittles him, exposing him in front of everyone as the sad, pathetic bully that he is. He tries desperately to cast aside her proclamations of his wrongdoings as the talk of a mad woman, but she continues talking earnestly, and the onlookers, his superiors among them, know that she's telling the truth.
Someone get her out!
Hawkins slaps her, but she stands unfazed. She sings an Irish song, a song of her people that were treated so poorly by the English, all the while staring directly into his eyes, piercing him with every word. In the beginning of the movie, the English troops used her songs for their enjoyment, not truly knowing what they meant. Now, in this moment, while singing, Claire is telling him that the songs were never for him. All those times she was forced to sing for them, she was thinking of her homeland and her family. Hawkins was and is nothing to her. He may have killed her family, but at least there was a time when she had one that loved her, something that Hawkins will never have. After exiting the building, Claire collapses in the street, her duty fulfilled. Billy picks her up and rides her to safety. That night, Billy comforts her best he can. It's obvious to him that the life is draining from her eyes. Her desire to live is fading, but he wants to protect her.
We don't fix him. We kill him.
So that night, he paints his skin with the battle colors of his people. He sneaks into the inn where Hawkins is staying. He enters Hawkins' room and throws a spear into his chest. Claire finds him there. Billy is then shot by Ruse in the hallway, but Billy stands tall anyway and approaches him, shoving a second spear into his throat. They exit the building together and ride away. They find their way to a beach. Billy is dying, but he sings in defiance anyway, proving the strength and resilience of his people. He dances despite the pain. His pride is strong and untarnished by the oppressive white man that tried so hard to beat him down. Even as death looms over him, he stays strong. Billy and Claire watch the sunrise together. Billy's life is coming to an end. He compares his heart to the sun as it slowly rises. His spirit is just as strong as it ever was, even though his heart may stop. Claire sings a Gaelic song, signaling the end of this horrific chapter of her life, one that will never leave her, but one that she can hopefully one day learn to live with thanks to Billy, a man that pulled off the impossible and gave her a glimmer of hope for some sort of future. The movie ends with Claire taking a breath, the first breath of this next chapter of her life, whatever it may be. But one thing's for certain, and it gives her some semblance of peace, that when her life does come to an end, she has her family waiting for her. Such a beautiful and horrific movie. A movie about finding unlikely companionship in the worst possible circumstances. The movie is dreadful to watch, but it has this underlying message of hope at the end, which I like a lot. Unfortunately, this doesn't ring true for the next movie we're talking about. In fact, this next movie mocks the viewer for having any sort of hope for the protagonist. It's pretty fucked up. It's called Funny Games. The original was released in 1997. It was written and directed by Michael Haneke. Who hurt you, Michael? Who was it, Michael? Who hurt you? We'll get him if you don't make any movies like this ever again. He remade this movie. I can't even imagine making it once. He made it again for an English-speaking audience, 10 years after the first one. It stars Naomi Watts and Tim Roth. Pretty weird, right? You don't see this happen very often. He probably did it so he could include some Hollywood star power in the movie, and making it English increases its reach. We'll be looking at the original in this movie.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Both of the movies are basically identical, so if you watched one, you've basically seen the other. The movie's intro is brilliant. We start by watching the family play a music guessing game in their car. The music that they're guessing is operatic and classical. Pretty mellow stuff. And then the title card shows itself, and it's accompanied by an intensely jarring audio tonal shift. The music that starts playing with this huge bright red title card is a death metal nails against chalkboard grating song. And it's loud, especially when compared to the music that we were just listening to. It's done so brilliantly because the game the characters were playing a few seconds earlier forces the viewer to focus in on the music, making the song change that much more impactful. It also does a pretty good job preparing the viewer for the horror show they're about to witness. The song goes on forever too. God, it gets old fast. I can't help but imagine Michael Haneke with a massive troll smirk on his face in the editing room when they were making this intro, because goddamn. This movie shares some similarities with Speak No Evil, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later. Just like in Speak No Evil, this movie centers around a 3-person family. A mother named Anna, a father named George. Well, really it's pronounced Georg or something like that, but I'm just gonna call him George, because, you know, I'm American. And their son, Georgie.
Hiya, Georgie.
They stop their car outside the gate of their neighbor Fred's house, and they see him outside with 2 unknown people wearing white shirts in the distance. Anna asks Fred for help with the boat in 20 minutes. After a moment, Fred agrees to help. The family drives away and comments on how their neighbors were acting pretty odd. Georgie comments on how their daughter Cece wasn't outside with them, and George replies that she was probably in the house. They arrive home. The neighbor shows up with one of the kids who's wearing white gloves. The dog barks at the unknown kid, potentially trying to warn them of him.
What the dog doing?
Anna starts preparing dinner. Meanwhile, George and Georgie are working on their boat. Later, the second kid comes over and knocks on their door. He's also wearing white gloves. He tells Anna that they were sent over by their neighbor to ask for eggs for a dish they're cooking. He also claims that he's distantly related to them. He's stuttering and visibly nervous. Anna gives him 4 eggs, and he immediately drops them before exiting the house. She cleans them up. He then asks for 4 more. She gets them. And then he accidentally knocks their wireless house phone into the sink full of water. Paul enters their home too, and they claim the dog won't let them leave. Paul asks Anna if he can try out one of their golf clubs. Anna reluctantly agrees, so he takes it outside. And then the dog outside starts barking like crazy, until finally it cries and stops. It's pretty clear what just happened.
My boy.
George, who is working on the boat, hears this and goes to investigate. Anna is getting understandably fed up with these 2 guys. She thinks that they're pulling some kind of prank on her, when the reality is far more sinister. Paul's friend is named Peter, by the way, but Paul also calls him Tom, and Peter calls him Jerry at one point.
Okay, Tom. Okay, Jerry.
I guess they have nicknames for each other. Tom and Jerry. Paul keeps pushing Anna to get them some more eggs, after they had already taken and broken 8 of them. George arrives and asks them to leave. They don't listen, so George slaps Paul. Paul then takes a golf club and hits George's leg, crippling him. All the while, Paul and Peter are acting strangely and infuriatingly polite, with the clear motive to get a rise out of the family for entertainment. Paul insinuates to them that he injured their dog with the golf club. So then Paul plays a game of hot and cold with Anna, so she can locate her dog. During this scene, Paul breaks the 4th wall and winks at the camera, which is something he will continue to do throughout the film. Eventually, Anna finds her dog's body in the car. Friends of the family arrive on a boat and call out to Anna, because they saw that their boat was getting ready to sail. Anna walks down with Paul to greet them. Scenes like this are so annoying because clearly she's dealing with a psychopath, you know? She should be doing everything in her power to regain control over the situation. As soon as this boat hit shore, she should have been telling them everything about what happened. What would Paul do? Kill her right there in front of all these other people? With what, his bare hands? Good luck. I know that she's frightened, okay? And I'm sure most people would be if they were dealing with someone like this. And she wants to protect her family, that makes sense. But you'd think the best way to do that is to get them out of the picture as fast as possible. She does tell them that she's gonna visit them later that night or something. Cool, that's gonna help. They get back to the house, and the 2 boys establish their dominance over the family. We learn pretty quickly that Paul is the leader of the 2. And he even frequently bullies Peter throughout the movie, mostly just by calling him fatty over and over. These 2 kids fuck with people for fun in the most depraved and psychotic ways imaginable. Paul tells George lies about Peter's upbringing to see his reaction, and then he bets them that in 12 hours all 3 of them will be dead. He then turns to the camera, breaking the 4th wall again, and he asks the audience if they think the family will make it or not. The 2 guys talk amongst themselves in front of the family for a bit. They mostly just talk about Anna like she's an object. Peter asks her to make them some food. Paul bullies Peter for his weight. They then take Georgie and decide to play a game called Kitten in the Bag. They put a pillowcase over Georgie's head and order Anna to strip. The pillowcase is to prevent Georgie from seeing his mother's naked body, because that would be bad. They need to uphold moral decency after all. Paul hurts Georgie over and over until finally, Paul convinces George to tell Anna to strip for them. This movie is amazing advertisement to get people to purchase a gun for home defense. Although this movie takes place in Germany, I think the version that takes place in the States makes a lot less sense. These kids would be shot and killed upon entering their first home in America, okay?
Pas auf, dass ich dir deine Eier nicht ausreiße.
Paul orders Anna to redress. George and Anna grab Peter, which allows Georgie to escape. Peter tapes Anna's limbs together, and Georgie finds his way to the neighbor's house. He's pursued by Paul. Of course, the neighbors have proximity lights that go on when you enter their property, which alerts Paul to Georgie's presence. It's so annoying, but I love how it builds dread. Meanwhile, Peter drones on and on about how all of this could have been avoided if George hadn't slapped Paul, and if they just gave them eggs like they asked. Obviously, this isn't true, and he's just saying this to entertain himself. Or perhaps there's a part of him that actually believes this, and he's trying to justify the harm he's causing, but it's more likely that he's just fucking with the family. Georgie is now in their neighbor's house, with Paul searching for him. Now, I know Georgie's a kid, but holy shit, the amount of noises he makes is absurd. When he's running around upstairs, it's like... Paul puts on some music, the same insane music that played during the movie's intro. Poor Georgie. He picks up a shotgun he finds on the floor in the hallway, not knowing at all how to use it. When Paul finds him with the shotgun, he snidely teaches Georgie how to use it when he knows damn well the thing isn't loaded.
What did he say?
They return to their house, and Paul tells them that Georgie tried to murder him with the shotgun. He brings the shotgun with them, along with 2 shells. They try and decide who to kill first. Paul tells Peter that he can decide while he makes food. While gathering stuff from the fridge to make a sandwich, he hears a gunshot from the next room, and is completely unfazed. This tells us that this is definitely not the first time that they've done this. These guys, well, more so Paul, are completely comfortable invading someone else's home and calling it their own temporarily, as they slowly torment, torture, and kill the inhabitants. They're sadistic sociopaths that do this for fun. We aren't shown who Peter decided to kill right away. First, we're shown the TV covered in blood. That's on some sort of NASCAR channel. The next shot is gruesome and haunting. Anna sits there staring off into nothing. Georgie's body is on the floor. Blood is everywhere. Anna sits there for a while, until finally deciding to hop up and turn the TV off. She listens for a moment before realizing that the two aren't there. So she hops to the kitchen to grab a knife in order to free herself. She had forced her grief down in order to survive. George, on the other hand, is grief-stricken and sits on the floor wailing. His acting during this scene is too good. It's honestly hard to watch. And this scene is long. It goes on forever. The camera sits on this scene, letting us marinate in this horror. Haneke really wanted us to absorb this scene. How nice of him to do that to me. In all seriousness, it's a great filmmaking tactic. Before this scene, the movie's pacing was pretty normal. When we hit this scene, the pacing slows to a crawl. It's the most horrific scene in the entire movie. So forcing the viewer to sit there with the characters was ingenious, but also sucks to watch. Now free, Anna tries to calm George. She's under the assumption that Paul and Peter are gone, that they decide to leave for whatever reason. Of course, this is just another part of the game. Peter and Paul want them to exist in their agony for a while, and they're curious to know how they're going to try to escape. Anna and George discuss what to do next, and they do so in a very convincing way. They go through all of their options, and they're realistic about what they can and can't do. They think about what Paul and Peter could possibly be planning. This whole part feels very authentic. They decide that George is in no condition to try and escape, but Anna can. George tells her to find bolt cutters and cut her way through the fence that surrounds the property. And after doing so, she can try and make her way to a nearby inn. But before she leaves, she finds that their phone is working again, but it won't make any calls. So they waste way too much time trying to get it to work. Also, for some reason, Anna asks George who to call. I don't know. The Ghostbusters? Batman? Who else would you call, dude? And for some reason, neither of them know the number to call the police? What? Maybe it's different in Germany, but in America, when we're very young, 911 is drilled into our brains. If you live in the States, you know 911. Everybody does, but whatever. I have to say, the people that play Anna and George, Suzanne Lohart and Ulrich Muhi, their acting in this movie is incredible. George reacting to his leg pain due to his injury is some of the most believable pain acting I've ever seen. Both of their sorrow and dread is so acutely conveyed that it almost feels too real. So real, in fact, that it makes you, the viewer, super uncomfortable. When Anna kisses George for what she assumes is the last time before leaving the house, the acting here is incredible. So Anna successfully cuts a hole in the fence and escapes their property. Meanwhile, George hopelessly blow dries their phone in an attempt to get it working again. I also think it's kind of ridiculous that these two kids will leave the phone there. Even if they thought it was broken, it makes no sense that they would leave them with the phone. They also left a kitchen knife so Anna could free herself. Maybe they did that on purpose, but it's pretty silly of them to leave weapons around for these people to use against them. Maybe that's part of the game too, who knows. Also, Anna leaves the house before giving George the knife. You think him having the knife would be nice for when the kids come back? I don't know, give him something. A golf club? I don't know. The dude can't move very well. Give him some means to defend himself. Also, Anna leaves the house with nothing to defend herself. She could have taken a golf club or the knife. I don't know, something would have been nice. This next part is a little infuriating. So there's a gate that Anna needs to open to get to their neighbor's house. Georgie got there by walking through a body of water. She tries to enter a code to make the gate open, but the code doesn't work, so she can't enter. Next to the gate's keypad is a block of cement that stands like 6 inches shorter than her. She could definitely climb over this, but instead she decides to scream for help. I mean, she thinks that her neighbors are still there, so it's kind of understandable. But earlier she saw them with these same kids. Does she still believe that they're related? That makes no sense. You would think that she would come to the conclusion that they killed them as well, especially if she saw them with them earlier. Either way, obviously they don't answer. So she runs down a long road, which is annoying because earlier George told her to avoid the roads because the 2 kids might be watching them. But whatever, she has very bad memory. As she's walking down this road, she sees a parked car with its headlights on. It drives past her. She screams at it after it passes her. And then another car approaches. She decides to take her chances on this one. What a fucking moron. Oh my god. She knows that these kids are out there somewhere. Don't trust a single car you see. Not a single one. If you have to trust a car, then wait till you're on a busy road, where the chances of running into them in particular are very slim. And then try and get someone to pull over. Or, you know, just go to the inn like George told you to. That'd be a good idea, I think. I know she was getting tired from walking, but what's a little jog, you know? I'd rather jog than die, personally. Also, George just kind of like chills in the house the whole time. You'd think he would try and find a hiding place until someone came to the house. I know his leg is fucked up, but you can still crawl around, I'm pretty sure. Find a hiding place in the house at least. You know what I mean? Or better yet, crawl outside of the house. Crawl your ass to the boat. You know how to use a boat. I know it's gonna hurt, you know. Your leg is fucked up. I get it. It's gonna hurt like a bitch, but crawl your ass to the boat and use the boat. We already know that the 2 kids didn't use the boat because they're in a car that picks up Anna. What the hell are these kids gonna do to George if he's out on a boat somewhere? You know? I know that if he falls into the water, he's screwed, right? I get that. But still, if these kids come back, I would still rather be in a boat with a fucked up leg than in this house waiting for these kids to come back. Is that weird? So yeah, the boys pick up Anna in their car and they bring her back to the house with a ball gag. So they're back where they started, basically. They're both sitting on the couch with the kids opposite them. Paul continues to try and play games with them. God, he's so insufferable, but you know, that's the idea. He breaks the 4th wall again during this part. He tells the audience that he can't kill them yet because the movie hasn't reached the length that it needs to be a feature-length film, and it needs, you know, a full plot. It'd be too early to kill them right now. This movie being self-referential makes Paul feel more terrifying than he already is. Like, no matter what the characters or the viewers want, the movie is gonna play out the way Paul wants it to play out. And our only means to fight back is to turn the movie off altogether. Paul saying this almost insinuates that, you know, if it wasn't a movie, the entire family would be dead by now. Anna is unresponsive to Paul, so Peter stabs George off camera, and all we can see is Anna's reaction to it. They threaten to continue causing him pain if she doesn't play their games. Paul's newest game calls for Anna to recite a prayer, and if she doesn't mess up the prayer, then that means God has intervened, and she can decide what happens next. But there's one problem. Anna isn't religious, and doesn't know a single prayer. It's hinted that Paul knows many prayers. Is it because his family was religious? Or is it the more likely reason that the many people he tortured prior to this family prayed, and so he learned them over time? Paul doesn't just want her to pray, he wants her to pray in a specific way. Fervently, he says. Anna then hastily grabs the shotgun on the table and shoots Peter. Paul grabs the shotgun from Anna, and then scrambles to find the TV remote. Why on earth would Paul want the TV remote so badly? Well, remember when I said he was in control of this movie's plot? I wasn't lying. He uses this remote to rewind the movie you're watching. Yes, that actually happens. He takes the remote and rewinds the movie. After rewinding, we watch as he stops Anna from shooting Peter. I can't think of a single movie I've seen that does something like this. It's so unique. And I kind of love this movie for that reason. We are completely at Paul's mercy as viewers, just as much as the family is. It's such a clever spin on the fourth wall break. After all, in a lot of horror movies, the good guys almost always strike back against the villains, even if the villains end up winning in the end. This movie allows that to happen, only to then say, nah, it didn't actually happen. Ripping the rug of hope out from under the viewer. It's so funny. Not only is Paul playing games with this family, the director is playing games with the audience. It's ingenious. So Paul prevents her from taking the shotgun this time, and he uses it to kill George. They then take Anna to a boat. Hilariously, they give her a rain jacket to wear, as if getting wet is her biggest problem right now. Earlier in the movie, George had asked for a knife while he was on the boat, and Georgie had brought him one. They left the knife in the boat, and the camera even focused on it. In most horror movies, this would tell the audience that this weapon will play a big role later on. More often than not, this weapon is used by the heroes to either escape or kill the villains, but not in this movie. Anna tries to use this knife to cut the rope that binds her. Paul immediately notices this. Peter takes the knife and throws it into the water, and then they nonchalantly push her overboard, ultimately killing her. Paul and Peter discuss the differences between reality and fiction before arriving at another house. Paul knocks on the door, a woman answers. Paul claims that he's there on behalf of Anna, and he came to collect some eggs. So here he is again, asking for eggs on behalf of the last person he killed, to repeat the process over again. The movie ends with Paul giving the camera one last cocky smile. The real antagonist in this movie is Paul. Peter seems to me more like the unfortunate friend that fell in with this psychopath, and basically acts as Paul's subordinate and does his bidding. So why were Paul and Peter talking about reality versus fiction? Paul says to Peter something along the lines of, there isn't much of a difference, is there? Basically telling the viewer that what you just watched could easily happen in real life, and probably has happened at some point. So how did this happen? How did a family with a gated house allow two kids to enter and kill them all? Well, simply put, the family couldn't fight back. They didn't know how. They weren't prepared for this sort of thing. To them, people like these kids only exist in movies. Most suburban families like this have never had to fight for anything, let alone their lives or the lives of their loved ones. Paul has mastered the art of manipulating the everyman's hospitality, using people's kindness against them, forcing them to fight for their lives for the first and last time, all for his entertainment. So yeah, that was Speak No Evil, The Nightingale, and Funny Games. 3 great movies that are very difficult to watch. Like I said before, I wouldn't recommend anybody watch these movies, but they are good. It's very strange to say, but I simultaneously don't and do recommend these movies. If that makes sense. I don't know. Check out this sick shirt, dude. It's like a tentacle monster coming out of a house, and this guy's like, oh my god, is that my house? Oh no, why is it a monster? That's so weird. You can get this shirt and many like it at alienclothing.com. That's AYYLIEN clothing.com. Thank you so much to all my patrons that make videos like this possible. I really appreciate all your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.